10th bestseller book. Vikram is a prolific historian who explores the diverse sections from past. He has studied about Kashi Vishwanath, which has existed since eternity, to Savarkar, to Gauharjan, and now the famous or the infamous Tipu. So before I start, let me tell the audience that we can call him a career historian, as we would call career diplomat, career administrator. He's a career historian. But that's not only Vikram. He's an engineer, mathematician, banker, a trained Karnataka classical singer, and more importantly, now a mentor for budding historians. And as he said in his speech, that the budding historians will be true to the meaning of itihas. It does happen. So, Tipu Sultan, the saga of Mysore's interregnum, 1760 to 1799. It's quite a book of volume. You all have seen this, weight and impact. I will start with S.L. Bhairappa, who writes a prologue for this book, and he writes, I quote, "This book is exceptional, for it is an exhaustive, intense, and well-researched book with factual accounts and a captive narrative style." So tell us, Vikram, why Tipu? When did you thought, you have to do research on Tipu? How did this book happen?
Thank you, Prachi. Am I audible?
ये मॉनिटर्स अगर चला देना तो हम भी सुन पाएंगे स्टेज पे जो हो रहा है, क्योंकि स्टेज की आवाज आप तो सब सुन रहे हैं, हमें नहीं आ रही है. तो जहां भी इसका मैनेजमेंट हो, प्लीज ये चला दें. Yeah, I mean any of the two. Yeah, because we cannot hear anything.
We can't hear most.
And we have to. Yeah, I mean a big day for all of us.
I think by the time they start, I will begin. I think I can hear myself now. A very good evening, everyone. It's truly a very special moment for me today for the Mumbai launch of my 10th book, Tipu Sultan. I must say here that my mind goes back in memory to several years, actually, when I was a boy of 12 or 13. And as I was mentioning in my speech earlier, when I was kneeling down outside class during history classes, because I hated the way it was taught in school. But while I was doing that, there was also, I'm sure many of you in the audience would remember this tele-serial called The Sword of Tipu Sultan, which Sanjay Khan had produced, and he also played the lead role. And in that, if you remember, the Wadiyar Maharaja of Mysore, the Hindu Raja, he was shown like a clown, like this obese retard who was dancing with the court dancer. And the Maharani was shown as one of those typical vamps from an Ekta Kapoor serial, always conniving, conspiring, trying to, throw Tipu away. Now, Hyder and Tipu were actually usurpers of the throne. And to show them in a good light, the Maharaja and the Maharani were shown in this manner. And there were lots of protests in different parts of Karnataka, the state I come from, southern Karnataka, which was part of the erstwhile royal state of Mysore. Because the Wadiyars laid the foundation of modern Karnataka. And if you remember, even the studio had caught fire, and Sanjay Khan's face had got burnt, and a lot of Kannada media was speculating that this is the curse of the Wadiyar and so on. So as a young boy who otherwise hated studying history, I don't know what this controversy did to me, that over the next 10 years, I think I was constantly researching. My interest in the subject was piqued. Every vacation meant going to Mysore, meeting members of the royal family, archivists, historians, just to get to know about that one king and queen who were misrepresented in the serial, never with the intention that this would become a book someday or I would become a historian or anything. It was Swanta Sukhaya, only for the joy of exploration, research and discovery. And over those 10 years, I realized that there was not a single book that was written in the modern times which covered the entire span of the Wadiyar rule. Now, they were one of India's longest reigning royal houses who ruled for 600 long years. And Indian history being so Delhi-centric, where every little dynasty around Delhi is covered, but vast parts of southern India or northeast India does not feature in the larger imagination of Indian history. So that was when, quite by serendipity, my first book came out in 2008 called Splendors of Royal Mysore, The Untold Story of the Wadiyars. It was my first book. Now, during the course of talking about the book in various places, I was just maybe 26 or 27 then, I remember this episode where in Bangalore there was a lecture I was giving somewhere on the interregnum period. Now the subtitle called interregnum, it actually means an intermission, an interval, where a regular government is overthrown, or the usurpation actually happens. So the 40-year interregnum of Hyder and Tipu, I was talking about that. And during the course of that talk, I was actually quoting some of Tipu's own letters. He's writing to his commanders, go to Calicut and kill so many kafirs, break so many temples, or, in Mangalore, breakage of churches. And while I was doing this, suddenly a section of the audience, they broke out in protests. And paper rockets were hurled at the stage, and the lecture had to be scrapped, and I was ushered to safety backstage. But my poor father was sitting in the first row. And somebody, some Tipu fan club or somebody like that, came and thrust one envelope in his hand and said, you have an only son, and if you want him to live long, please ask him to mind what he talks. Now, obviously, that led to a huge furor at home. My mother, who didn't keep too good health that time, was totally alarmed and flustered by what happened. And just a few weeks later, I had written an article which had some references to Tipu in the Deccan Herald newspaper. And there were violent protests yet again. And right in the heart of Bangalore, in MG Road, my effigy was burnt. Probably at the age of 26, 27, to have your effigy burnt was quite something. And when the editor of the newspaper called me and said, they're asking for your apology, I said, over my dead body, because everything I've written is based on facts. If they have a counter view, let them write another article, let them write something else. And in fact, she sent me the picture of my effigy burning, and those days there was Orkut. That was my Orkut profile picture for several weeks. So obviously, for me, it was okay, young blood, maybe I still could take all that, but my parents were truly, extremely worried about my safety. We didn't know what we were signing up for. And so my mother extracted a very strange promise from me, that she told me, from now on, you're not going to talk about Tipu Sultan in public. And I had to promise her. But I lost her in 2018, and after that I thought the promise also didn't matter anymore. So I broke the promise. She told me not to talk about Tipu. I wrote a 900-page book on him. I broke the promise to my mother, no doubt, but I hope that from whichever heaven she is in, she would protect me against any unintended consequences of bigotry that might arise because of this book. So that's how your question on why Tipu, these 40 years of the interregnum from 1760 to 1799, I think they form a very, very important part of Indian history. The 18th century, which was a century of chaos, a century of disruption in the politics of the country. After the death of Aurangzeb, all the centrifugal forces had dissipated, and you had principalities which came up in different parts of India. And in the midst of that, you have these wars of succession in the Deccan, the Carnatic wars, in Hyderabad, in Arcot, and so on, and the Maratha power rising from here, this part of the country. And the Wadiyar actually being literally, a puppet to his, very, very capricious commanders-in-chief. And in the midst of all of this, you have this man called Hyder Ali, who rises to fame and changes the course of history, not only of his own life, but of the entire subcontinent. Because in those 40 years, 4 Anglo-Mysore wars were fought. It took the British 40 years to subjugate Mysore, which was the last bastion of resistance against British imperialism. So I really wanted to zoom into this particular era and bring to light several nuances of Tipu's character. He is a historian's enigma. He is a reader's enigma. He's everybody's enigma, because there are so many contradicting shades to his character. And that's what, through this book, I've tried to illuminate these several shades.
Thank you. I will now go to Manoj ji. Please tell me why this book is important as a Indian, any reader, any common reader, why this kind of book should be read by everyone.
फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल गुड इवनिंग, नमस्कार. इतिहास जानना और पढ़ना ज़रूरी है और अब पहले से भी ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. महर्षि अरविंद ने कहीं एक बात कही थी कि जो देश 3 पीढ़ियों तक अपनी संस्कृति और अपने सच्चे इतिहास से दूर हो जाता है, उस देश की संस्कृति भी मिट जाती है और धीरे धीरे सभ्यता भी समाप्त हो जाती है. तो जो एक चीज़ हमको और आपको डरा सकती है वो ये है कि हम तीसरी पीढ़ी हैं. हमसे पहले जो कुछ हुआ ठीक है, वो हमारे कंधों पे उसकी जिम्मेदारी नहीं है, लेकिन अलार्मिंग ये है कि अगर मैं और आप नहीं जागे, अगर हमने सही हिस्ट्री पढ़नी और डिस्कवर करनी नहीं शुरू की तो अब बहुत देर हो जाएगी. जो लोग भुला देते हैं इतिहास को अपने, जो लोग भुला देते हैं इतिहास को अपने, उन लोगों का भूगोल भी बाकी नहीं रहता. तो अगर हमें अपनी ज्योग्राफी इंटैक्ट रखनी है, हमारा भूगोल खंडित हो चुका है, 3 टुकड़ों में हम बढ़ चुके हैं, शायद इसीलिए क्योंकि हमने अपने इतिहास की वैल्यू नहीं की, हमने अपने इतिहास की कदर नहीं की. और जो इतिहास हमने पढ़ा, माफ़ कीजिएगा, जो हमें क्लासरूम्स में पढ़ाया गया, जो यस सर, यस मैडम, गुड मॉर्निंग टीचर, गुड आफ्टरनून टीचर बोल के हमने पढ़ा, वो कितना बड़ा झूठ था. वो श्री विक्रम संपत और मेरे बगल में बैठे हुए आनंद जी कई मौक़ों पे इसका खुलासा कर चुके हैं. हमें हैरानी होती है इस बात की कि पूरी ज़िंदगी जो हम पढ़ते रहे वो सब 360 डिग्री बदल गया वक्त के साथ. जब सूचना क्रांति का दौर आया, जब हमारी खुद की चेतना जागी, जब हमारी उंगलियों को यह ताकत मिली कि हम जो चाहें, जो दस्तावेज चाहें, जो डॉक्यूमेंट चाहें, हम पढ़ सकते हैं, तो हमें पता चला कि अकबर इतना भी महान नहीं था जितना महान हम समझते रहे. अकबर द ग्रेट हमें बताया गया. इस चीज़ ने मुझे बहुत व्यथित किया, कई बार व्यथित किया. बिफोर वी मूव ऑन टू आनंद जी, बहुत बचपन से आप एक हीरो अपनी आंखों में लेके चलते हो और हमारे हीरोज बड़े सेकुलर तरीके से तराशे गए. हमारे हीरोज इंजेक्ट किए गए हैं हमारी नसों में कि देखो ये तुम्हारा हीरो है. ज़बरदस्ती हमें हमारे हीरोज दिए गए. हमें पता चलता है भाई इतना बड़ा सेकुलर आदमी, इतना बड़ा हिंदू प्रेमी, ये तो दुनिया में दूसरा कोई हुआ नहीं. लेकिन हमें कभी नहीं पढ़ाया गया कि ये भी वही आदमी था जिसने चित्तौड़गढ़ में 30,000 सिविलियंस को जिहाद के नाम पे कटवा दिया था. फतेहनामा चित्तौड़गढ़ अगर हमने पढ़ा हो तो हम सबको पता है, ये हमसे छुपा लिया गया. हमें पढ़ाया क्या गया? जो जीता वही सिकंदर, जैसे मुहावरे पढ़ के हम लोग बड़े हुए क्लासरूम्स में. जो जीता वही सिकंदर, क्योंकि यूनान के इतिहासकारों ने लिख दिया कि भाई सिकंदर तो जीत गया था, विश्व विजेता था. हमारे इतिहासकारों ने कभी ये बताने की जहमत ही नहीं उठाई कि ये जो विश्व विजय के लिए मेसोपोटामिया से निकला था, इसको भारत से हमने खाली हाथ वापस भेजा था, भारत के आगे कभी बढ़ने ही नहीं दिया. हमारा इतिहास चुप रहा, हमारे इतिहासकार चुप रहे, मैं कहूँगा कॉम्प्लिसेंट रहे, लेजी रहे, आलसी रहे. इसीलिए हम दूसरों का इतिहास दोहराते रहे, दूसरों का झूठ दोहराते रहे, जिंदगी भर बोलते रहे जो जीता वही सिकंदर. जबकि हमें कहना तो ये चाहिए था कि जो जीता वही छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज. हिंदवी साम्राज्य की ध्वजा लहरा दी. हमें कहना तो ये चाहिए था जो जीता वही बाजीराव बल्लाड़, 40 युद्ध लड़े, एक भी नहीं हारा. हमें कहना तो यह चाहिए था कि जो जीता वही महाराणा प्रताप, सिसोदिया कुलभूषण घास की रोटियां खाके अकबर से लड़ते रहे. विश्वास मुझे निज वाणी का है राजपूत कुल प्राणी का, वो झुक सकता है वीर नहीं यदि दूध पिया छत्राणी का. तो क्योंकि हमने इनके गुण नहीं गाए, क्योंकि हमने अपना इतिहास सलीके से अच्छे से नहीं पढ़ा, क्योंकि हमारे साथ छल हुआ, धोखा हुआ, शायद इसलिए आज हमें विक्रम संपत जी की जरूरत है. और एक बात समझ लीजिए, जो हमारे साथ हुआ है वो हमारे बच्चों के साथ ना हो, ये मेरा और आपका उत्तरदायित्व है, ये हमारी जिम्मेदारी है. हमें एक सही आवाज को, एक सही पुस्तक को, एक सही ग्रंथ को मौका देना होगा, अवसर देना होगा. एक बात मैं पहले भी कई बार कह चुका हूं, आज फिर कह रहा हूं कि जंगल का इतिहास शिकारी तभी तक लिख सकता है जब तक शेर अपने हाथ में कलम नहीं लेता. एक शेर ने अपने हाथ में कलम ले ली है, अब हमारा सच्चा इतिहास लिखा जाएगा.
Thank you so much. Now I'll come to Anand sir.
All excited.
See, there are two narratives when we talk about Tipu. One side says he is a symbol of resistance because he fought British. and the other says that he was a religious bigot. And in his book, Vikram has talked about the atrocities that he had, or the fanatic he was, or the iconoclast he was. Can we come to a conclusion that he is the Aurangzeb of South? But we were never taught this in our history books. And especially when, and I'm specifically asking Anand sir this question, because he has spoken at length in his book Hindus in Hindu Rashtra also. And one community called Mandyam Iyangars, they have not celebrated Diwali for last 250 years. So can we call him the Aurangzeb of South? And if so, why? Please tell us.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on this dais with such luminaries, and congratulations again to my elder brother Vikram. देखिए, to answer your question, Prachi ji, देखिए, as a scientist, there can never be two narratives. You have to settle on one. That is what I...
हेलो,
ये मेरी साजिश करी गई है मेरे साथ, मुझे माइक बता दिया जस्ट बिकॉज आई एम फ्रॉम JNU, मेरी आवाज़ को दबाया जा रहा है. तो कोई ये नहीं कह सकता कि दो नैरेटिव्स हैं, बी फॉर्म ऑफ DNA डबल हेलिकल भी है, ट्रिपल हेलिकल भी है, ये कभी आपने नहीं सुना होगा. तो ऐसे ही टीपू के दो नैरेटिव्स मैं नहीं मानता. ठीक इसी तरह मैं नहीं मानता क्योंकि हिटलर ने भी ऑटो वाहन बनाए थे, हिटलर ने भी इकोनॉमिक प्लाइट जर्मन्स की वो करी थी, लेकिन क्या हम हिटलर को वैसे जानते हैं? डू वी रिमेंबर हिटलर एज समवन हु डिड सम गुड फॉर द जर्मन पॉपुलेशन? डू वी रिमेंबर हिटलर एज अ वाटर कलर आर्टिस्ट? डू वी? नो, वी डोंट. जब मन करता है तो वहाँ एक ही नैरेटिव है जो कि करेक्ट नैरेटिव है. हिटलर वॉज अ बारबेरियन. तो फिर जो हमारे बारबेरियंस हैं उनको हमने यूलोजाइज करना कब से शुरू कर दिया? और उन्हीं लोगों ने यूलोजाइज कराया है जो कि हिटलर को बारबेरियन मानते हैं. सिर्फ उन्हीं लोगों ने इंडिया में यूलोजाइज कराया औरंगजेब और टीपू को, जो कि बाहर कहते हैं कि किंग लियोपोल्ड जो था वो बारबेरियन था, जो किंग था बेल्जियम का, उसने कॉन्गो में इतनी एट्रॉसिटीज़ करी. वो जो उसने बेल्जियंस के लिए अच्छा किया वो नहीं मानते. वही जो यहाँ पे कहते हैं कि राम जन्मभूमि को राम टेम्पल बनाना गलत है, वो वहाँ कहते हैं कि किंग लियोपोल्ड का, सिसिल रोड्स का, पिज़ारो के स्टैचूज़ इलीगली हटाओ, लेकिन यहाँ पे वो कहते हैं ये. सो इट इज़ कुशनिंग ऑफ द क्राइम्स ऑफ बारबेरियंस. तो ये तो पहली बात है. दूसरी, as a scientist, unfortunately, I was not exposed to the kind of lies that we were being peddled with. जैसे विक्रम ने बताया, मैंने भी वो देखा स्पोर्ट ऑफ टीपू सुल्तान, और क्या क्या दिमाग में भरा रहा. कभी कभी तो मन करता है कि मुझे वो मिल जाए जिसने ये सब गलत लिखा है, मैं भी. तो एक तरह से ये आई एम वेरी हैप्पी विक्रम हैज़ रिटन दिस बुक. इसके दो फंक्शंस हैं. एक तो ये सच बताती है, और दूसरा जो झूठ बोल रहे हैं उन पे ये वार भी कर सकते हैं. एज अ वेपन ऑल्सो it is a figurative and a literal weapon. So thank you Vikram for. जैसे मेरी पूरी लाइफ मुझे बताया गया, हमारी टेक्स्ट बुक्स में ही बताया गया कि अशोका ने जो कालिंगा पे वॉर किया और इतने हज़ारों लोगों को मारा, उसके बाद वो दुख देख के वो कन्वर्ट हो गया हिंदुइज्म बुद्धिस्ट. मुझे फैक्ट बताया नहीं गया कि कालिंगा वॉर करने से 4 और 8 साल पहले वो ऑलरेडी बुद्धिस्ट था. मुझे वो मिल जाए जिसने वो गलत बताया, मैं क्या करूँगा. लेकिन ये मिलने वाली बात ही नहीं है. आपको याद होगा 2014-2015 में जब औरंगज़ेब रोड को रीनेम किया डॉक्टर APJ अब्दुल कलाम रोड, तो इतना हंगामा हुआ. लोगों को ये पता था कि 4.6 मिलियन हिंदूज़ का जेनोसाइड किया औरंगज़ेब ने, इतने टेम्पल्स ढाए, इतनी बारबैरिटी से ट्रीट किया कॉमन पॉपुलेशन को, लेकिन फिर भी उस नाम हट जाए उसकी सड़क से, लोगों ने कहा कि फाशिज्म आ गया, फाशिज्म आ गया. विक्रम के इतने अच्छे दोस्त प्रोफेसर रामचंद्र गुहा जो कि हिस्टोरियन हैं, उन्होंने एक पूरा आर्टिकल लिख दिया कि छत्रपति शिवाजी का नाम सड़क दिल्ली में होना ही नहीं चाहिए, क्योंकि वो रीजनल हीरो थे, कास्टेइस्ट थे. ये लिखा छत्रपति शिवाजी के बारे में, जिन्होंने प्लासी से लेकर पेशावर तक एक एम्पायर बनाया, उनको रीजनल हीरो बना दिया। तो ये मेरे बगल में जो बैठे हैं मनोज जी, इन्होंने एक बार किसी को नहीं, बाबर के बारे में एक टिप्पणी करी थी। अगले एक हफ्ते 10 दिन तक जो आग बरसी है इन पे, आप रिविजिट करिएगा। ये वही बाबर है जिसके मज़ार पे जवाहरलाल नेहरू गए, इंदिरा गांधी गई, राजीव गांधी गया, राहुल गांधी गया, लेकिन वो चारों आज तक राम जन्म स्थान नहीं गए। ये वही बाबर है जिसने कहा कि मेरा ये जन्म से अधिकार था कि मैं काफिरों पे मारूं, मैं गाजी बनूं, और मैं गाजी बना, मुझे गाजी करार किया गया, ये मेरा इस्लाम ने वो कहा है। तो ये सब चीज़ें हमसे छुपाई गई। वो अलग बात है कि मैं दोषी मानता हूं हमसे छुपाई गई, लेकिन कब तक आप दोष देंगे उन लोगों को जिन्होंने छुपाई? कभी ना कभी आपको उन लोगों को भी दोष देना होगा जिनकी पिछले 10 साल से सरकार है, जिनका काम था कि ये जो छुपाई हुई हैं उनको असलियत दिखाएं। ये काम सिर्फ विक्रम का नहीं है, ये काम उन लोगों का है जो कि विक्रम की किताबें पढ़े और उनको स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक्स में इंटीग्रेट करें। ये काम उन लोगों का है जो कि अभी तक हम कितने लोग कहते हैं कि हमारे जो हमने हमेशा सीखा है कि हम हमेशा वॉर्स में हारे हैं। विक्रम की जो किताब है, जिन्होंने 16 वॉर्स जो हमारे वॉरियर्स के बारे में लिखा है, वो 2 साल हो गए उसको आए हुए, अभी तक स्कूल्स में क्यों नहीं है वो? आप किसी भी स्कूल बच्चे से पूछेंगे, इतने मिलियंस ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन हैं, उनको पता ही नहीं होगा जो नाम विक्रम ने लिए उनके बारे में, जिन्होंने गजनी को मारा, गौरी को हटाया, ये सब किया। तो अल्टीमेटली दोष किसका है ये भी हमें ढूंढना है। ये बहुत ज़रूरी है इस टाइम पे, क्योंकि ये विंडो जो है ये बहुत प्रेशियस है। मनोज जी, प्राची जी, विक्रम, ये बार बार नहीं आएगी, ये नियरली चली गई थी और अब ये नेक्स्ट जब जाएगी तो इतनी फेरोसिटी से ये सारी चीजें, सबसे पहले तो ये जेल में होंगे, उनके नेक्स्ट सेल में मैं होऊंगा, और हमें जेल में जब खाना देने आएंगे मनोज जी तो उनको भी जेल में डाल देंगे। प्राची जी हमारे जेल में हमारी लाइफ के बारे में लिखेंगे, इनको भी जेल में डाल देंगे। तो जो फेरोसिटी आने वाली है उसका आपको अंदाजा भी नहीं है। पीपल आर जस्ट वेटिंग, दे हैवंट चेंज्ड देयर व्यूज, एब्सोल्युटली नॉट, दे आर जस्ट वेटिंग फॉर देयर डे। And if we are not prepared to tell the truth about our history, I'm afraid we have already lost the war.
Thank you. Vikram, you have dealt extensively about Hyder Ali and his rule and how he was actually the fighter who prevented British from conquering the southern part of India. Tipu actually just inherited it, right? So can you just talk more about Hyder and Tipu, and if you can compare their...
No, it's quite a contrast in study of the father and the son. Now this boy Hyder, he was the son of one of the commanders of the Nawab of Sira, and the father dies when this boy was 4 years old. His elder brother Shahbaz is about 8 years old. Now the father owed some money to someone. And since the debt was there, what the debtor did was put both these boys into a nagada and, beat on it. And literally a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old boy kept as captives. And at that pitiable condition, his mother runs away to the Maharaja of Mysore and pleads for mercy that, can you give that money so that we can release my sons? And then the Maharaja actually takes pity on these fatherless boys, gives the money and releases them. And says when they come of age, we will take them into the Mysore army. And in 1749, Hyder makes his first entry into the firmament of Mysore politics. And look at this man. It's a fascinating story of a man's career and arch, that in just 12 years of coming as a common foot soldier, he usurps the throne of the same man who was his benefactor and actually takes over as the supreme dictator of Mysore. And it's a Machiavellian politics. I think he'll put all our modern politicians to shame. The way in which, he hunted with the hares, ran with the hounds, all of this, that it was something that, the Machiavellian cunningness, avarice is a story in itself. And then he realizes that he's a usurper. There's a Hindu Maharaja in a Hindu majority kingdom, and so he should not overtly impose Islamic tenets on the, kingdom. And so he keeps the Maharaja as a puppet. He's there on the throne. All the trophies of war are gone and submitted to his feet. All the farmans are coming in the Maharaja's name, but everybody in the kingdom or outside knows where the real power, the Sarvadhikari of the kingdom was Hyder. So he kept this very tenuous balance also. He didn't indulge in conversions within the area of Mysore and so on. Now he dies in the middle of the Second Anglo-Mysore War, and his son Tipu, as you mentioned, he inherits this kingdom which his father made. It was literally given on a platter to him. He didn't have to work hard for it as his father had. And that hubris, that arrogance that comes, the intoxication of power, addiction of power, in the 17 years that he ruled, there is a steady exponential decay. While Hyder's career graph is an exponential increase graph, this fellow, from the heights of glory, there is a continuous decay in his career. And he literally dies in the fort walls of Srirangapatna in the last Anglo-Mysore War when the British come and invade. Now, what does he do? I think that's why it's very important to understand the father as a foil to the son, to see what the difference in leadership styles of both these people were, their religious policy towards other communities other than their own. All of this becomes important, and that's why Hyder forms a significant part of this book. You asked, Anand, about the atrocities, the legendary atrocities that Tipu committed. I mean, your blood boils, you're filled with pathos and anger when you research, read, or write about these. In every place within and outside Mysore, as you mentioned, there's a community within Mysore called the Mandyam Iyengars, Vaishnavite Brahmins of Melukote and thereabouts. On the day of Deepavali, Naraka Chaturdashi, which we just celebrated now, 700 men, women and children of that community were ruthlessly put to death. And in what manner? It was almost like a Jallianwala Bagh episode where he invites them all to a feast in a temple in Srirangapatna, and they come, without suspecting him. While they are in the middle of their feast, the temple doors are closed and elephants are set inside, and they're all trampled to death, literally. And to this day, after 250 years, that community does not celebrate Diwali. While all of us celebrated Diwali, that community back in Karnataka actually observes this day as a day of mourning or Shraddh, and does it maybe 1 week later. So that is an intergenerational trauma that these souls which have been put to so much of barbaric torture faced. Similarly, the Nayars of Malabar, northern Kerala, there was a large conquest called the Padayottam in Malayalam in Kerala, and the Nayars faced the brunt of both Hyder and more of Tipu's atrocities, mangled masses lying all through streets and streets, kilometers of streets. In Coorg, what is Kodagu today, even dead Coorgis were ordered to be converted. These are his own letters. Tipu was a voracious reader, writer. He wrote prolifically in Persian and other languages. And he only writes to his commanders, go and convert not only those living captors, but also the dead bodies. So even the dead bodies are circumcised and converted, from their religion. And like the Mandyam Iyengars, on 12th of December, 1785, he invites all these Coorgis to this place called Devati Param. And again, false, assurance that we will have a negotiation. They all come, and then, they are unarmed. And while they are in discussion, from literally stabbed in the back, and thousands of people killed, so much so that the river that flows there actually became a river red color of blood, and that is the name it still carries in Coorg. And so every year on 12th December, the Kodavas who are there, they commemorate that as Martyrs' Day for what happened to their ancestors. Similarly, the Christians of Mangalore, the Canara Christians, almost 60,000, 70,000 of them literally dragged, tied to elephant feet from Mangalore to Srirangapatna, about 300 kilometers, pregnant women delivering on the way, people dying. There's not even an opportunity to perform a funeral. Dogs and jackals are feasting on the corpses. And once they come, unless they convert, their lips and noses are cut off and they are paraded on donkeys all through the capital city. So the barbarities that we talk of, I think history is also it's a healing space where we at least talk about these atrocities. You can't give justice to those souls who have gone through what they did. But I think whitewashing that and denying it that this never happened, I think that is a double whammy, adding insult to the injury that the ancestors faced for so many centuries, and for what fault? Only because you didn't belong to the particular faith of the person who committed these atrocities.
Vikram, you mentioned that as a child, Tipu was full of hubris and this and that, and as a dynast, he was basically just gifted this power. Does any contemporary politician come to mind?
I know where you were leading that to. I'm not taking that bait.
So, you told about the atrocities, and it's really, one get horrified reading it, right? And you get sleepless nights. What kind of horrible description? So I leave it to the readers to, you really read it, the original work. But at the same time, I find a strong difference in this Tipu's personality. So at the one end, he is converting even the dead bodies, killing children, all that you mentioned. And at the same time, he is talking about foreign trade. And maybe at the same time, he is so insecure also that he is sleeping in some kind of hammock and going to astrologers, even Hindu astrologers, day in and day out. How can you summarize this?
Yeah, I know. That is the man full of contradictions and an enigma. In the Third Anglo-Mysore War in 1791, the Maratha armies come invading Mysore, and we are in Maharashtra, so we should talk about that, where the Pindaris, or the irregulars in the army, who were largely Pathans and so on, they go and plunder and loot the Sringeri Mutt, which is the seat of, Advaita, one of the 4 mutts that Adi Shankaracharya had established. And the Shankaracharya decides to go on a fast unto death, in protest against what happened, against the vandalization. And that is supposed to have sent shockwaves back to Pune. And the Peshwa actually sends, letters saying, this was a complete inadvertent mistake on our part. It was not part of our, political policy. We offer to give you, double the amount of money to reconstruct the mutt. Now, this is a part of real politics also, where he says, before the Peshwa can give you money, I will give you the money so that you don't take his help for the reconstruction. And in return, what does he ask? He says, why can't you perform havans and pujas for my longevity? And actually the Shankaracharya does it. He does a Shatachandi Homa and a Sahasrachandi Japa to actually, pray for Tipu's long life and his victory against the Marathas. And so it's a very complicated era which you cannot box into these blacks and white. There's lots of, more than 50 shades of grey that come in this, human character, particularly of someone like Tipu. And as you said, this over-reliance on astrology, his life was so uncertain. I think there was not a single day in his life which didn't go without war and bloodshed and all of that. So a man becomes very, very uncertain and, very, very scared about what's going to come next. So he knew astrology himself. He taught himself the art. And even on the last day, 4th of May, 1799, hours before his death, he was consulting the astrologers. He was seeing his own kundli and seeing, okay, the Mars, till the time the Mars, the Mangal Graha makes a particular, arch of transit, my life is safe. Till then, after that, I may be killed. And so there are some puja part being done in an iron pot. Oil is kept and he's looking into it, nazar utarne ke liye and all of that. And this is how this man turned out. And see the hypocrisy. On the one hand, after the Third Anglo-Mysore War, where he lost half his kingdom, he had to pay a war indemnity of 3.5 crores, for which he also pledged his sons, Abdul Khalik and Mahizuddin, as hostages. To get that money, he confiscated all the grants of the temples to the Brahmins and so on. On the one hand, you're taking away the grants. On the other hand, you're asking the same Brahmins to perform the pujas for your own long life. So it's an era of a lot of confusion, and I think it's very difficult to straitjacket that into, clear boxes.
I will just tell you that this New Age historian really researches, and I will
I just
give
want
you...
to add one thing to it. You also said that he was a freedom fighter. Now that's something that constantly comes. Now no doubt, there is no doubt whatsoever that he was a very, very brave soldier. He fought the British. He had visceral hatred for the British. In fact, after his death, in his palace, in his room, there was this contraption called the tiger toy. So the British were quite alarmed to see this. There is a huge tiger, a wooden tiger, actually feasting on a fallen British soldier. That's the toy. And it had a crank, so you could move it. And as the contraption moved, there were growls of the tiger and shrieks of the man who was being eaten by the tiger. And it is said that every day this man used to play this toy to actually, make his hatred for the British more strong. And when the British actually saw it, they shipped it back to London. And unwittingly, they placed this tiger toy in a library. And so in the middle of the day, when all the scholars were neck deep in research, the librarian writes that suddenly this tiger toy would start operating by itself, and there would be growls and shrieks, and all the scholars would get so scared and run away. Almost Tipu's ghost had come into that toy. Much later, the audio apparatus got spoiled, and the librarian says, thank God they didn't repair it. It still lies at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So quite like the owner who had been silenced, the toy also was silenced, and it's kept as a mute exhibit in the museum. And this hatred for the British, Girish Karnad writes a very flamboyant play called The Dreams of Tipu Sultan, where he's portrayed as larger than life, and something totally different, as Anand said, the distorted history of Tipu. Now, I went to the British Library, the India Office Library in London, and I was told that Tipu was a very vivid dreamer. He saw vivid dreams, and every morning after waking up, he would spend about 2 hours in his toilet, and whatever he remembered, maybe sitting on his pot, he actually wrote all those dreams. Now, those original dreams written in his own hand were there in the British Library, and I froze when I actually saw that. Of course, I didn't want to touch it too much because of the place where it was written. But when you actually translate these dreams...
Kejriwal also does that. Right? Kejriwal also does that.
Again, I'm not taking that bait. When you analyze those dreams too, every dream is full of violence. Suddenly in a dream, some angel appears, or Prophet Muhammad himself comes and says, go so many kilometers far and break that temple, destroy this church. So, in fact, I got those dreams even psychoanalyzed, because I think dreams are an index of your subconscious mind. A psychiatrist who went through this said, this man is consumed by hatred. Somebody who's constantly restless about blood and gore. You can imagine what sort of a person that would be. But the freedom fighter bit, he hated the British, all of that. But he was actually taking the help of the French to fight the British. And the French were no less colonial or imperialist than the British. So what sort of a freedom fighter is he? If not for the British, all of us in Karnataka would be speaking in French rather than in Kannada or English. And that's how the history of India would have been different. But not only sending these emissaries to France, to the Emperor Louis XVI's court and so on, he was also appealing to the religious sentiments of the larger Islamic Brotherhood of the Ummah, where even to get authority to be called the Badshah of Mysore, he sends an emissary to the Caliph, Ottoman Caliph, just like how the Khiljis, Tughlaqs and Lodhis, to get legitimacy to rule India, they would seek permission from there. Only the Mughals discontinued this practice. Tipu does the same. He sends emissaries to the Shah of Persia, to the Turkey Sultan, everything, listing and gloating over these atrocities he commits. He says Shah Alam, who is the Mughal emperor, he is now a weakling. He's come under the control of the Kafirs, Mahadji Shinde and so on. So I am the true Muslim. I am the true ruler. And look at how many people I have killed, how many I have converted. These are records of medals of honor that he wears, which he showcases to the people there. And just 2 years before his death, he writes to Zaman Shah, the Afghan ruler, the Durrani ruler of Afghanistan, very, very clearly, come and invade India, and put a plan for 2 years. In the first year, we will liberate the whole of northern India from the Kafir influence of the Marathas, Jats, Sikhs, and Shah Alam, who is an impotent person who is under the captivity of the Marathas. The second year, we will liberate all of South India from Kafirs. And at the end of it, let us meet at the Vindhya, at the middle, central India, and divide this whole landmass among ourselves and call it a Islamic caliphate. So that is our freedom fighter, who actually was so inspired by the, Kattarpanthi Wahhabi ideology of the Middle East, which was gaining ground just then, and planning to establish a Islamic caliphate. Now, whether Aurangzeb can be called the Tipu of the north, or whether Tipu can be called the Aurangzeb of the south, and whose atrocity was more, I think that is a question for which the jury is out. But I think stories of the south don't get larger, receptivity other than only where it happens. So that's why I think we cherry pick only some things of Tipu Sultan. Acha, he made rockets, he innovated on that, certainly, and he created a market for Mysorean products outside. Sandalwood, ivory, betel nuts, all of these things, Mysore silk and so on. He increased the produce, gave interest-free loans. All of that is fine. Those are very important aspects. But as Anand said, finally Hitler is not going to be recognized as a vegetarian who loved his daughter and played a toy with her. The social report card of a ruler, I think that is the major index on which you could measure what sort of a person he is, what his legacy is. And this legacy is not frozen in some 1780, 1790. As I said, the intergenerational trauma that communities face even today, the memories that are there has to be something to all of that. And as a matter of fact, today happens to be Tipu, 10th of November, which is Tipu Sultan's birth anniversary. So quite by
2015 it started. 2015 the government
Of course,
started.
there also, the megalomaniac that he was, he rebuts both the Hindu Panchang and also the Islamic lunar calendar and starts his own calendar called the Maududi calendar. So there are varying accounts. Some say 10th November 1750 he was born. Some say 1st of December 1751 because the calendars are so different. So sometime in this time he was born. But about 10 years ago, you had the Karnataka government, the then Karnataka government led by Siddaramaiah, who, again, the same CM now, who started observing this day, as you all know, as Tipu Jayanti. And of course, the politics I'm least interested in of both the parties. Both are, have their own faults. BJP protested, all that is okay. But then communities in Karnataka, whether it was the Kodavas, whom I mentioned, or the Christians, the Mangalore Christians, the archbishop there, the diocese, they came out, they had nothing to do with the Sangh Parivar ideology. They came out in protest saying, don't, besmear the memory of our ancestors. The Nayars protested, the Mandya Mayangars protested. Section 144 had to be imposed in Karnataka where more than 4 people cannot assemble. Police firing where 2 people were killed. In such a scenario, you celebrate a Tipu, Jayanti. No, now he has more things, scams to look after, so he doesn't want unnecessary controversy. So I think Tipu Jayanti has been scrapped, fortunately. But the BJP is no better. In the 2023 run-up to the assembly elections, they brought out this crazy story of 2 Gauda chieftains, Uri Gauda and Nanje Gauda. And they said these were the people who killed Tipu Sultan and not the British. Why do you do this? To gain the Vokkaliga vote in South Karnataka. Now, these 2 people are a complete figment of imagination. Nobody like this existed. No British historian, no Mysore historian ever documented about them. But Uri Gauda and Nanje Gauda become the heroes, fictitious heroes of Tipu's death. So I think in such scenarios, as Anand also mentioned, I think it becomes the burden or the responsibility of a historian to put the record straight and set things clear and not let political parties of both sides muddy the waters this way and play games, political football with history.
So I was talking about this New Age historian. So you have seen the book. Out of the 900 pages, 200 pages are just citations and references. That's what researcher is. That's what the research he does. But he is New Age. Why I called he's a New Age historian? And there is a staunch difference between the so-called historians of Delhi Circle, where you don't know even a single word of Sanskrit, and she or he can be a stalwart of ancient history. Anand got it, I think. So this guy is different. I will tell you, he has written a book on Kashi Vishwanath. For that, he learned Sanskrit from Shankaracharya. Now he learned Farsi to understand the documents in its original form, to analyze the documents in its original forms. The Delhi Circle historians I would say, they decide the conclusion first and then weave the theory around to the said conclusion. This guy...
Vikram's next book would be a biography of Rahul Gandhi. I don't know which language he has to learn for.
Vikram studies every single document, analyzes it with no prejudice in mind, and then draws the inference. I think I'll conclude this, but before that, I just want to just tell everybody that Vikram has just started a foundation for Indian historical and cultural research. As Anand rightly said, there has to be some history. You know, it's for long we are being taught. But if you ban, there is nothing. There is absolute vacuum. So somebody has to create that. So Vikram is the one who is doing that through this foundation. So can you just tell us about it?
Yeah. But before that, I want to ask a question. When I post this thing, his next biography.
Not
Vikram,
debate.
A month ago, which country were you in? Please answer. Please answer, Vikram.
Italy to do research on Tipu's possible connections there.
We will stick to Tipu currently.
So yes, this Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, or FIHCR, this was something that was founded about a year ago. And I'm very, very happy that two members of our foundation are also here. Rohan Pasricha, who's the Chief of Staff and heads communications, and Sudhamshu Hatamgadi, who heads the projects team. Now, you know, in all these non-left conclaves, everybody sits and, you know, there's a invisible voodoo doll of Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, D.N. Jha saying, they distorted history, they did this, they did that. But as you rightly said, where is the alternative scholarship being produced? Even to this day, you can demonize them as much as you want. But our university syllabus is full of their books. The IAS preparation, UPSC syllabus is the same, Ram Guha and Romila Thapar. She is the, uncontested queen on ancient Indian history. Where is the alternative ancient Indian history that anybody has written? And using primary sources as an evidence. So the only and only answer to distorted history is true, authentic, fact-based, truth-based scholarship, which is what FIHCR is trying to promote through a couple of verticals that we have. We have instituted, in the name of the famous historian, Sir Jadunath Sarkar, we have instituted a fellowship where every year we select people. It's open for everyone to apply. And 8 people have been selected this year, and they're given a substantial stipend of about 15 lakhs per year. And the ask is at the end of it, they have to come out with a publish-worthy manuscript. So imagine every year 10 books are added. In 10 years, you'll have 100 books as a counter. A counter to a book is a book. It is not street protest. It is not Twitter war, social media outrage. That is one vertical. The other is also projects that we are working on with several universities, including the Nalanda University, where we're doing something on Buddhism in India, the rise and fall of Buddhism in India. And to make history actually interesting, inspiring for our young people, we have a vertical called Yuva, where children 6 to 12 and 12 to 20 young adults, where we can tell history in an interesting manner, in the language they understand, animated videos, Instagram reels, whatever it is that Gen Z, Gen Alpha understands. But it should be based on facts. It should be based on research, but it should be accessible research. So that is what FIHCR is all about. Our website is also fihcr.com. And so I would urge all of you influential, people of the city to please look at the website and help us take the message far and wide so that unlike me who hated history and kept kneeling down outside class, the future yuva generations of our country don't actually hate history so much, because as I said earlier, history is that mirror in which we can identify ourselves as a nation, as a people, and as a civilization. Thank you.